Hi, my name's Abbey Salyer, and this is my final music composer presentation on Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. So, with his childhood and education and his upbringing, he was born in Salzburg, Austria on January 27th, 1756. And his father was a court composer. He trained Mozart to play the violin, the piano, and he started to get the hang of it pretty quickly. He composed his first piece of music at age 5, and it's said that earlier, at age 3, he was recognizing chords. So he toured many big cities all over Europe with his father and sister and fascinated everyone and became some sort of a child prodigy. And this was 1762 around that time. And on the right is a anonymous portrait of Mozart as a child. So with Mozart's up and coming, the Italian tours that he did with his father took him to places like Rome and many other cities in Italy, and he was just 13 years old. And while in Milan, he worked on a new opera called Mithridates, King of Pontus, and it was a huge success after Mozart rewrote several numbers to satisfy the opera singers, and he practiced it several times in rehearsal. And this really catapulted him into the scene in Italy and still made him very popular around Europe. So he traveled back to Salzburg, and then he became a organist at a church for a couple of years, and then he moved to Vienna to be a court musician. And he was looking for some type of career out of his musical talent, and he also traveled to places like Paris and Munich to try to find a permanent position for him, and he didn't have any luck there during that time. But Mozart, while he was a court musician in Vienna, became very well versed in different genres and was recognized for his opera buffas that had more personality and they were more appealing to that larger audience than opera serias with aristocratic people and rich people. And he soon became a salaried court concertmeister for the Emperor Joseph II of Austria, and this was later down the road in 1787. So, with Mozart's success in Vienna, this took place in 1782-87. This was kind of the golden years for him, and he spent lavishly his earnings and was making a lot of money from his sponsors, and he was working for Emperor Joseph II, but he didn't like to be tied down. His personality was that he did not like to be owned or felt like he was owned by anyone, and he rather had been a freelance composer or musician who also taught younger people or pupils to play music on certain instruments like the piano or violin to still make money on the side. Most of his contributions and his success came from chamber music and his piano music and most of his earlier pieces. And this also came from symphonies, and he also sometimes conducted while playing on the piano. And while in the 1780s, he actually met his wife, Constanze Mozart, and it was after a failed attempt of getting with her older sister, and she was the youngest of all the sisters. They married on August 4th, 1782, and it was a day before his father's consenting letter arrived in the mail, and he did not so much approve of the relationship yet, so that's why his Mozart's relationship with his father and his wife and the relationship between the wife and her father-in-law was still kind of rocky. And they had 6 children together, but only 2 survived infancy, and they were both sons. So some of Mozart's top compositions was The Marriage of Figaro, which was really big and significant for him because it wasn't quite allowed to have Italian music in Vienna with the Austrian emperor. He kind of had some bans on certain things, like no ballet during the opera and several other rules, but Mozart managed to work it out and make the opera become popular within Vienna and not as much of a big shock factor that he was kind of bending the rules. The Magic Flute, and there you see in German, was also one of the biggest and most popular operas of his that was inspired somewhat by his mother-in-law a little bit. And then the other ones, Final Piano Concerto in B flat, Don Giovanni, that was an earlier one of his. None of these are in order of chronologically, by the way. It's just I've put this all down in a list. That like Giovanni, the Piano Concerto Number 2, the Clarinet Concerto in A major, and the Requiem, which is also one of his bigger pieces, and it was one of his last pieces that he ever wrote. So, the end of Mozart's life, after the Requiem piece, like I just said, Mozart's mental and physical health was becoming drained. He was also in a lot of debt, and he could not find a lot of luck financially and fiscally, and he died leaving his wife in a lot of debt. So he died on December 5th, 1791, and was 35 years old. And at the time, in 1791, that was still considered pretty young to die. And the cause of his death, it was very wishy-washy, but there was lots of speculation about what caused it. The autopsy at the time was that he had miliary fever, which the doctor basically said could just be from anything, and there could have been an epidemic at that time of miliary fever, but we weren't too sure. But one very popular theory was that Italian composer Antonio Salieri was poisoning Mozart because they had a rocky relationship and because of jealousy, because Mozart became very, very famous and was very, very good at writing music quickly, and the music was good. So Salieri, well, not obviously, but he could have well been jealous of Mozart in that standard. And following the theory of this Salieri killing Mozart theory, this caused the popular reference Amadeus, which was the original play by Peter Shaffer, and this followed, well, it was preceding the movie Amadeus, which was inspired by the play, which was made in 1984. And with some research, studies have shown that Mozart most likely died from trichinosis after eating undercooked pig. So, with Mozart's legacy, his many sonatas, concertos, symphonies, operas, and more genres of music he made inspired several other famous composers after his time. An example being Beethoven, but a much more recent example being Billy Joel. And even today, many people are fascinated by his music made some 200 years ago and beyond, and they use it for background music, they use it for music in tutorials, learning how to play the piano, and even in film, like with comedies and serious films, dramas, and his music will live on as some of the greatest pieces of classical music in all of history, aside from composers like Haydn, Bach, Handel, and Beethoven. And he not only befriended some of these other composers, but he also was inspired by the things they wrote, and he made some of his compositions based off of the styles of them and making music for them as well. And these are some of the sources I used. I used the Britannica encyclopedia, and I also used biography.com. And that is all. Thank you.